we would previously not have had access to pre-COVID. Therefore, geographic and financial barriers have really been reduced or eliminated. One of the challenges that come with this, though, is that we are now exposed to people we previously might not have been, and we are also now having to be very cognizant of the biases that we operate in with our teams. Interrupting, Kibby, is everything okay? See you coming up? Good to go. Alrighty. So this new virtual world has resulted in exposure to more people groups, and a variety of cultures. This also then has revealed the biases that we operate with, consciously and subconsciously. So in this session then, we will explore the impact of culture on our work environment, and also empower ourselves in terms of what can we do about that. Now, if you forget everything I've said during this presentation and you remember these three things, you will have done well. Point number one, anticipate that in the current times of living, there will be cultural differences and nuances in our teams. We weren't raised by the same parents, and we weren't raised in the same household, so our value systems and our beliefs differ. The second thing, be sensitive when these cultural differences arise, but also be cognizant of the impact these differences might have on individuals and also at a team level. And lastly, respond. Now, that response will be context specific. But as an Agile coach, if you're an Agile coach here, or just a team member, you will have to respond and take your team through the journey. Now, we're talking about culture, and therefore I think it's important to define what I mean by culture for the purposes of this talk. Now, a verbose definition, which I found in one of the dictionaries, is as follows. Culture is said to be a pattern of basic shared assumptions which are learned, keyword. These assumptions would have worked well enough to be considered valid and are therefore taught to new members as the correct way to perceive, think, and feel. Keywords being learned and taught. Now, a simpler version would be, it's really just ideas, customs, and social behavior of a particular people group in a society. So this differs from place to place and from region to region. I want to share some of the cultural nuances which I have spotted in my teams. Did you know, for example, in the Asian and African culture, not making eye contact when you speak to a superior is considered as humble and respectful, whereas in the Western culture, that could be seen as dishonest and at times withdrawing. In my teams, it was interesting, I've noticed the traditional gender roles. Men are more likely to organize team buildings, and the women in my team are more likely to organize the team lunches. One that was of particular importance to me, or rather intrigued me, is did you know that in countries like Norway, socialization takes place in a structured and intentional manner? So for example, you won't just chat to a stranger. But did you know in South Africa, it's perfectly normal to strike up a conversation with just anybody? Do you see how these various cultural nuances could potentially impact your teams, but also your individuals within a team? So these are some of the patterns which I have picked up, and one needs to be pretty woke to recognize and understand these stereotypes, but most importantly, while suspending judgment. So I use that term woke. Lately, it's been linked to a number of deeply meaningful movements. For example, Not in My Name, Black Lives Matter, and the Me Too movement. But for the purposes of this conversation, I'd like us to reset the meaning of that woke and strip it down to its basic elements. In South Africa, it really just means street smart. So to give an example, we might say a 90-year-old is woke if they know what LOL means or stands for. So for the purposes of this presentation, when we talk about woke, it really just means street smart. So I'd like to share an experience which I had in one of my teams, which really just triggered my interest when it comes to this topic. Now, my journey as an Agile coach was not without its challenges, but whose is, right? I arrived at a new job. I was excited and starry-eyed. You'll be thrown into the deep end, I was told. I love a challenge, and this is exactly what I was hoping this new job would be about. Now, I was the first of the Scrum team to arrive, and I was escorted to my desk. My plan of action for that day was really to observe, nothing more. When the whole team arrived, the outgoing Scrum Master mentioned that today was the day of the sprint review. And with my experience, he was pretty confident that I will be able to facilitate the event objectively. It was new, but okay. This was especially important to him because he wanted to participate in the retrospective, meaning his facilitator's hat was off and mine had to be on. How hard could it be, right? I prepared myself and I got my mental sprint retrospective template ready. Set the stage, gather the data, generate insights, create actions, and wrap up. The venue had been booked and confirmed. Tick. The Scrum team arrived. Tick. The setting of the stage went really well. It is in the data gathering where things started to go south. The team was as diverse as can be. There were men and women, all 5 racial groups as defined by Statistics South Africa. That would be Black, White, Indian, colored, and other. And there was a mixture of tribes within 2 of the 5 racial groups. We had Xhosa and Zulu from the Black population. We had a Telugu and a Tamil person from the Indian population. Now, one interaction that has been etched in my memory for the longest of time was one I had with a male team member. He had made a statement, and in my quest to get to the why, I asked some clarifying questions. I was looking at him in the eye as a sign of focused listening and respect. He seemed to be getting more and more irritated with every question. It is only after a couple of weeks, after getting better acquainted with the team, that I came to learn that he was from a people group, aka culture, where making eye contact is a sign of a challenge. The fact that I'm a woman and I was standing up, thus making myself appear larger or bigger, and him being a male and was sitting down, thus making him look like he was yielding, were only part or a few of the things that were adding to his agitation. Now, when I reflect back on this specific period, one of the learnings that become applicable to me is that the first Agile value statement, individuals and interactions over processes and tools, goes much, much, much deeper than just the spoken word or body language. In summary, I had an experience. I inspected and I reflected on what had happened. And I was on a journey to coach the team to navigate and also teach them how to adapt. So practically speaking, what is it that I did and what did this coaching look like? And what are the things that would have changed for the team? What this team specifically looked at were the Scrum values. We asked the team during the team liftoff to have a look at the values and define personally what will these values in action look like for this particular team. We did this so that we could give the team language so that we knew commitment to us looks as follows. And I just want to read to you what the team had decided the values would look like. The team said, as an example, courage in action would be that each team member would speak up when they felt uncomfortable during a discussion or an activity. The team agreed that all their actions and interactions would be based on respect. The team was committed to creating a work environment where all team members were equal, and this then would foster an environment where everybody could be open. Lastly, the team's intentions were not only to focus on the deliverables, but to work towards a healthy team dynamic as well. And to quote the Scrum Guide, or what the Scrum Guide says specifically around these values, verbatim, it says, these values give direction to the Scrum team with regards to three things: their work, actions, and behavior. So this experience really was a learning for the team and I, and it was interesting to see how we could practically use the Scrum values and principles, and also the Scrum values, to extrapolate an action plan, a practical action plan, where the values were not something that lived on a wall and we quoted them out of context. So I would be interested to find out from the audience, and let's discuss what has been the impact of you engaging with various people groups from different cultures been on your teams, and what have you learned? And from the learnings, were you able to actually use any of the Scrum values and principles to bridge that gap? Thank you so much. Would anybody like to share? Or rather ask some questions?
I've got an observation. I've got a good friend, Brandon, who's South African, and he immigrated to the UK. And when he came to Scotland, and in all our teams, we swear a lot. So we curse like sailors. I think most pirates are Scottish. It wasn't until like 6 months of working with Brandon felt comfortable enough to say, I don't like you swearing. It's not of my culture. So I think that took courage. Yeah. And he was feeling disrespected for a long time. So, and I felt really bad when I found out about it. Yeah. So that was an interesting, it's an interesting one where, we didn't really we didn't really have that open space. But if Brandon had been a bit more courageous earlier, then we could have got that respect situation sorted a bit quicker. So yeah, interesting.
Thank you for sharing, Scott. I have an example where we had a colleague from a different religious background, and he happened to be fasting. I had organized a meeting and we had food. So can you imagine? This poor person was fasting, and there we were having all his favorite treats. Anybody else? I see we have June and Jamie. Chimunya, do you want to share anything? I'm picking on you because I can see your face.
Not yet. Not yet.
Not yet. June, are you there?
I think one of the ones,
Okay, I don't.
one of the, it's not, I guess it's in teams. As a South African, maybe within my culture, we greet a lot. Like there's even a saying in my culture that you can never run out of greetings. So Scott, I could see you 5 times in a day and greet you each of those 5 times like it's the most normal thing ever. But I've realized that sometimes with dealing with people from other cultures, this greeting thing, it's just a, we've seen each other. Why are you doing this thing again? It's
That's creepy. That's stalkery.
I've actually experienced it even at with shopping, for example, where you're standing behind somebody who's necessarily not African and they just collect their groceries from the cashier and they walk away. The cashiers get offended to just say, they didn't even greet me. And then in my mind, it's always, how many people have you been greeting since the morning? But for them, it's a thing of you don't value me as a human being by the mere fact of not saying hello to me. So, yeah.
Hello.
Hello, Belinda.
Hi, good afternoon. Apologies for being late.
I think. No problem.
Nono, Brooke has a question for you. I think they don't quite get the question, so would you like to repeat it, please?
Hi, everyone. I'm sorry I joined late. I joined in mid-conversation, and I think I had joined when a question was posed out to somebody in the audience that didn't respond. I was just wondering, I got the tail end of that. If you could please repeat the question we're exploring, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks, Brooke. So what we were talking about was the impact of culture on our work environment. And I really